Welcome back to my series on chess opening theory. In this video, I'm going to be looking at the e takes d5 sideline in the Winawer variation of the French defense. So the French defense begins with the moves e4, e6, d4, d5, and the Winawer is when white now plays knight to c3 and black plays bishop to b4. So the sideline begins with e takes d5. Black should, of course, take back with the pawn. Taking back with the queen is not good since it leaves this bishop stuck on c8, and white might be able to just develop normally and gain time by attacking the queen. So taking back with the pawn. We have a position that's pretty much an exchange variation, but with a knight on c3 and bishop on b4. White will now very often play bishop to d3. I didn't explain the purpose of this move before, but basically there are two purposes of bishop to d3. One is to control the f5 square, the other is to get the knight out to e2 at some point. Right, so, the bishop does not block the knight, or knight does not block the bishop, whatever the case may be. Anyway, here, the most common move for black is knight to c6, but I personally like knight to f6. And previously, we had looked at the move pawn to a3, but today we're going to look a little bit at the move knight to e2. So here, in this position, it is best for black to castle. So like, as before, as in the a3 line, we do have this problem with this bishop having difficulty finding a good square to go to, but we should castle now. Because if we try to solve this problem with bishop to g4, then white can play f3, and after bishop to h5, g4, bishop to g6, the move pawn to h4 is actually very much playable. I should show the engine evaluation. Engine actually likes this position. It gives a bit of an edge to white here. White's king is actually pretty safe in the center, thanks to the knight in front and all that kind of stuff. And white has a very annoying initiative going on over here. So that's why castling first makes more sense. Just kind of waiting and seeing what white does, seeing if white castles. So back in this position, it's best to just castle. It also deals with any possible disruptive checks along the e-file, although those currently are not possible because the knight is kind of in the way for white to do that. And then the most common thing for white to do here is to now castle. Throwing pawns forward would be a bit premature and would not really gain white any time because the bishop is not out yet. So white will very often castle. And then here, in this position, it's still best for black to wait and just make some improving moves like either rook to e8 or pawn to c6. Because if we still try this bishop idea, part of the issue is that, compared to the previous line, is that white is now castled. In the previous video, when we looked at pawn to a3, white spent a move playing pawn to a3, and as a result, in this position, their king would still kind of be in the center. But since the king is now castled, what's interesting is that, white can just develop with bishop to g5, for example, pawn to c6, and then go for some f3 stuff. And then play knight to f4. Since the king is not in the center, this knight f4 idea works a lot better. But anyway, we can just improve, and white has a number of moves that they can play here. But we're going to look at a move that a particular player plays, since overall this variation objectively is actually about equal, but black does have to play a little bit accurately, and black does have to solve the problem of this bishop over here. So the move we're going to look at is pawn to h3, just completely disallowing bishop to g4. But we're not really in trouble. We have some other ways of making use of this bishop. So after h3, pawn to c6. Part of the purpose of pawn to c6 is just to add some overprotection to the d5 pawn over here. So then when white now plays pawn to a3, we can just go bishop to d6. And in this position, like in the game we're going to cover today, white played knight to g3, but I thought I would briefly talk about another game that features this line. So in this other game, which was also played by Grandmaster Harikrishna, white played bishop to f4, and black kind of went a little bit wrong here. Like this was Harikrishna Caruana 2019, so also the same year here, although this was a blitz game. And here black went for knight e4, and after bishop takes e4, d takes e4, rook e1, f5, like white actually has a pretty sizable advantage objectively. Like black's f5 push and this trade here isn't really all that sound, and black still has this very serious problem with the bishop. Instead, in that game, after bishop to f4, black could have gone for pawn to b6, with the idea of playing bishop to a6 and maybe trading this bishop away that way. So, this line, it's not to be underestimated. Like, white in particular is an expert on this line, so I thought I would choose a game that features them. But in this particular game, white now played knight to g3, and black responded with knight bd7, just developing another piece. White played queen to f3, bringing another piece to the king side. White is getting ready for some king side play. Black now played knight to f8, getting ready to reroute this knight to a particular square. White played bishop to g5, threatening to mess up black's pawn structure by playing bishop takes, knight, and then if queen takes queen, the pawns would be all messed up on the king side. So black now plays bishop to e7. One thing thought I should mention really quick before continuing is that back in this position, it looks like, oh, we could play bishop takes g3 and that would mess up white's pawn structure, but back in this position I should say. But this is a terrible idea. Like, do not do this. It just gives white this very nice open f-file. Like, white can get very aggressive, maybe do this or maybe do this, like stuff like that. Do not do this. Do not trade the bishop like that. Like, the dark square bishop is still our good bishop, for one thing. Like, this damaging of the structure actually benefits white. So instead, knight bd7, queen f3, knight f8, bishop g5, bishop to e7. And the idea here for black is to play knight to e6, hitting both this bishop and this pawn, and basically forcing white back. Like dealing with white's aggressive play on the king side. Kind of stopping all this aggression. And before continuing, I thought I should just introduce the players. So with the white pieces, we have Grandmaster Harikrishna Pentala, or if you prefer, Grandmaster Pentala Harikrishna. He is a very strong Indian player from a previous generation, although he's still active right now. He has a rating above 2700. In fact, his peak rating was, I think, 2770 was it in 2016? I'm trying to remember. And he has won a number of prestigious tournaments. Like, he was very strong as a junior player. In fact, he held the record for youngest age that an Indian player held the grandmaster title. That record was actually recently broken by Gukesh D. And he also has represented India multiple times at the Olympiad. And most important for us, he is also the author of a course for dealing with the French defense called Toast the French Defense, also known as the French Toast. So I chose this game partially because we want to see white at their best. We want to see white like going very strong on us, like playing very challenging moves for us to deal with, so that we'll be ready. And with the black pieces, we have Grandmaster Noël Studer, who is a Swiss grandmaster, and I actually thought this was kind of funny how in the previous video I also covered a game featuring Swiss players, and anyway, he was the Swiss chess champion in both 2016 and 2019, if I'm remembering things correctly. And unfortunately had to retire from chess due to an injury and some health issues, but he still tries to help players improve at chess through his blog called Next Level Chess. And basically, when I saw this game and learned more about the players, I was thinking, okay, I definitely have to choose this game because this is just a very cool game. Like, this is probably one of the games in Black's career that they are most proud of because, spoiler alert, Black won this game. And this particular game, I'm not fully sure about the tournament. I'm not 100% sure, but I think I managed to figure out which tournament it was. So I think it was at the SMM in 2019. So that is a Swiss tournament. And the way that I figured it out was I managed to find a social media post that Black made about this game and kind of figured out, oh, he must be talking about this very specific tournament, and which I managed to look up on the Swiss Chess Federation's website. So hopefully I'm right. Hopefully I have the correct tournament. And more information about the players and the event can be found in the video description. And now back to the game. So in this position, the idea for Black is to play knight to e6 and drive White's bishop back, like stop all this aggression. Like, Black might figure out what to do with this bishop later. Like, one idea that you do sometimes see, like an idea that Grandmaster Geary showed in some variations in his course, is Black can sometimes play pawn to a5, pawn to b6, and then bishop to a6, like trade the bishop that way. But instead, in this game, White now played a move that was inaccurate, which was knight to f5. And Black responded. Well, you can probably figure out how Black responded to this move, if you've been paying attention. Black responded by getting rid of their bishop, getting rid of their problem piece. Black played bishop takes f5. White played bishop takes f5. Black played pawn to g6. Like, Black isn't too worried about weakening the dark squares here because very often Black can reroute their own bishop, maybe like f8, g7, stuff like that. It's kind of more important just to get these nasty pieces away from you. So White played bishop to d3. Black now played knight to e6, hitting both this bishop and this pawn. So White played bishop to e3. Black now plays pawn c5, striking in the center. Suddenly it's Black who's being aggressive. Suddenly it's Black who's putting pressure on White. White has to react somehow because this is very unpleasant. White can't even take this pawn because pawn to d4 would be a fork. So yeah, this is not pleasant. White has to do something about, the fact that this pawn here is actually pretty tricky to defend. Like, knight to e2 isn't any good because the bishop's trapped. Knight to b5, you can just play a6 to kick the knight away. In fact, the knight might even be trapped on b5. Yeah, it is. So White retreated their knight. Probably the best move they had available. And in this position, Black now played pawn to c4. Although, if it was me, the engine actually approves of this, I would probably play c takes d4, which is much more dynamic, much more aggressive, but this is probably just a style thing. White probably was like, these pawns, I'm a bit uncomfortable with this. I don't really like this so much. But basically, the idea is after white moves their bishop somewhere, black could play queen b6, and the amount of aggression that black has on the queen side here is very annoying for white to deal with. Like, these two pawns, they look like weaknesses, but they're actually just as much a strength as they are a weakness, as they are controlling these squares. They are taking these squares away from white's pieces. This is just not a fun position for white to play. After a move like rook a b1, according to the engine, is the best move for white, you know, defend the pawn on b2. I could play rook a c8, and this is just very fun position for black. Like, we've got the isolated pawns, but we've also got the files next to the pawns. And basically, black would have a lot of fun just playing for a win here. But this is not what happened in the game. I thought I should still mention it, though. Black instead went for pawn to c4, or, you know, kind of a bit more of a solid approach, but not a bad approach. This is fine, too. We have bishop to e2, queen to b6, you know, still the same square for the queen, hitting the pawn on b2, maybe getting ready to just shatter white's pawn structure on the queen side. Knight to c3. Black plays rook a d8, since this pawn on d5 was under attack. Knight to a4, queen to a6, knight to c3, queen to b6, knight to a4, and the players repeated moves and agreed to a draw. Just kidding. No, black was much braver than that. Black is not a super grandmaster. Black wants to play for a win. So black played queen to c6. Knight goes back to c3. On c6, the queen supports the e4 square, control of that square, so black plays knight to e4. Very strong square for this knight. In fact, white is still in quite a bit of trouble here. Here, let's see, I had something to say here. Ah, right, I remember now. Basically, white either has to move their knight or let black trade over here, because the problem is that after knight takes e4, d takes e4, this pawn is going to be lost. The knight and the rook both hit the pawn, so white can't really trade there. White would just lose a very important pawn if they did so. So as a result, after knight e4, instead of moving their knights to a passive square like b1 or a2 or d1, you know, that's not very fun. White decided to just improve their pieces. Makes sense. But of course, the problem, of course, is that these pawns are just very unhappy. They are very weak. They are doubled backwards pawns, and, you know, they're very difficult to defend. And generally, with weak pawns, what you want to do is you want to push them. You want to be aggressive with them. You know, kind of like, you know, the two doubled isolated pawns in the center would be, but like, you know, they would be pushed forward, controlling some important squares. But these pawns are not going anywhere. They're just stuck here forever. So black played queen a4, hitting this guy. White played rook a2, very not fun move to make. Black played queen a5, bishop to d2. Black plays bishop to g5 with all sorts of nasty ideas. Like, basically, black's idea is to play bishop takes d2, knight g5, knight e4, just get in there, hit this guy again, remove one of the defenders of this guy, and, you know, all sorts of nasty stuff. White cannot trade bishops, of course, because after takes, queen g3, knight e4 just wins material, so queen g3 is no good. And if queen f4, they're probably like according to the engine, knight e4 is best, but I think just knight takes h3 check is simplest. Takes, take the bishop. Like, I would probably play that myself, just because, you know, black's pieces are very well coordinated, applying a lot of pressure on white's position. White loses a pawn, white's king gets a bit exposed. This rook is very happy. This rook is going to come to e8 to support this guy. This is just not a fun time. Well, very fun time for black, I should say. But anyway, that's not what happened in the game. White probably foresaw all of this. White probably calculated that. I was like, okay, I'm just going to drop my bishop back. Black played rook e7. White plays pawn to g3. Black drops back, bishop to h6, maybe getting ready for some knight g5, knight e4 action. We have pawn to h4, stopping knight to g5. Black's like, okay, I've got another way in. Black plays knight to c7. We have bishop to f1. I'm kind of moving the bishop away from where the rook was hitting it, freeing up the queen a bit. Black plays knight to b5. This does add another attacker to the pawn, but there's a better idea that black has in mind. It also adds an attacker to the a pawn, but, oops, wrong rook. But black isn't really threatening to take that because the knight would just be pinned to the queen. So white now plays rook a1. Black plays knight d6. The idea being to get to this very nice square for the knight. Very strong square where the knight would be very active and would be doing a lot. And white probably does not want to kick it away with pawn to f3. That's not a fun move to make. It would just weaken the king. We have pawn to a4, knight to e4, pawn to g4, pawn to f6, bishop to g2. The ancient doesn't really like this move so much, but I didn't figure out the reason why. It's probably not important. Queen to c7, rook a to b1, applying some pressure over here. Bishop to f4, improving the position of the bishop, just in case it somehow gets locked away with pawn to g5. Stuff like that. For one thing, white's not the only one who can play pawn to g5. Rook b2, black plays pawn to g5, queen to h3, king to h8, just getting the king to a safer square, because things are going to get, black anticipates that things are going to blast open on the king side. Black might want to put both their rooks on the g file. Very sensible move. King's just hunkering down and getting ready for all of the big guns to, open fire on white's position. Rook db1. Pawn to b6. I had something to say here. Basically, if white takes like this, then this is just quite good for black. Black, like the knight, is also quite good on g5. Black might be able to even get at the get at the h file at some point. Might do stuff like that, like maybe bring the rooks over in like this. That might be a little bit tricky. And one thing that's quite funny is that if this trade happens even earlier, or like all the way back here when black first played g5, the queen is actually completely trapped. That's pretty funny. I forgot to mention that. Anyway, it's not what happened in the game. Pawn to b6, rook to b5, pawn to f5. Things are very tense on the king side here. White decides to now take on g5. Black takes with the knight. We have queen to h5, rook de8. The g file is not open, and black's like, you know what? I think I'm going to apply pressure over here. This bishop, it can't really move. So that kind of forces white's next move, which is king to f1, because the bishop was under attack by 2 pieces and only defended by 1. Rook to e2. Rook to d1. White anticipates, black's idea, which is to bring the queen to apply pressure onto the bishop. Queen e7. Rook b1, adding another defender. Queen to e6. gf5. Queen f5. Black was threatening probably to play pawn takes g4, so that's probably why this trade happens right now. Bishop to f3. Rook 2 to e7. Mission's kind of been accomplished over here. The rooks will now turn their attention elsewhere, like either to the g file or to the f file. We have bishop to g2, since the bishop's a little bit vulnerable over there, potentially, lead to some nasty tactics, stuff like that. Bishop g3, rook d2, bishop to f4, rook dd1, and here the players repeated, no, they did not. Black found the right approach, the right way to break through. Black played rook to f8. We have rook to b5, trying to attack this thing, but that's pretty much irrelevant. Black plays bishop to g3. And if you want you can pause the video and try to figure out what's black's threat. For example, if white now played rook takes d5. Well, actually, no, it's not. I guess it's not that obvious, but if you want, pause the video. What would you do here as black? Black had a very nasty threat, and rook takes d5 would just be completely ignoring it. I will reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1. So it's a very simple little tactic. Rook takes bishop over here. Doesn't matter how white takes back, either with the king or with the rook. This will be checkmate. So black was basically threatening, when they played bishop g3, black was threatening a little checkmating combination. So as a result, rook d2. And in this position, black has been working very, very hard throughout this whole game, applying a lot of pressure onto white. If you want, you can now pause the video and try to figure out what black now played. Like, the engine does consider this move to be a little bit inaccurate, but I think it's a fine move. I think it's a fine idea. Like, black's been working so hard, black just now wants to cash out, just win some material, and use that material to win the game. So I will reveal the move that black now played in 3, 2, 1. So in this position, black played a very simple move much simpler than what the engine wants black to do, which is just black played knight to e4 with a double attack on white. Black has 2 threats. Knight takes rook and queen takes queen. And so white has to lose material here. White has to lose an exchange at the very least. So white, kind of just bailed out. White was like, okay, I'll take the queen. It's important that taking this rook comes with check. White takes back, rook takes queen, and black still has a fair amount of pressure on white's kingside over here. So white doesn't have time to take this pawn. So white plays pawn to f3, very unpleasant move to make since it blocks the bishop. We are now in an endgame. Black decides to activate their king, very sensible. Pawn to a5, white goes for a pawn trade. Since when you're losing, you generally want to trade pawns. In this position, black played the move rook to h5. I don't really understand this move. The engine prefers for black to play pawn to h5, but my guess is just that black maybe was in time trouble, or maybe there's increments. Maybe black just wanted to gain some time. Like, there could be any number of reasons. And rook to h5, it's by no means a bad move. It doesn't lose the game or anything like that. So, like, we are currently on move 57. So white plays rook to a6. We have king to f7, pawn to f4, rook to f5. Like, part of, I guess, what might be a little bit bad about rook h5 is just that the rook took its eye off of the f-file, allowing the pawn to come forward. We have king to g1, bishop takes f4. White plays a cool little idea. Bishop takes d5, check. I personally would probably actually accept this bishop trade here, like rook takes bishop, bishop takes bishop. The reason why is because white has the bishop pair. Like, the bishops are stronger when you've got both of them, so just getting rid of one of them, I think, makes sense. And also, what's it called? White's bishop would not be on the same color as this pawn. But then again, it's actually very difficult for black to defend this pawn, since the bishop would be covering c7, all that kind of stuff. So maybe that's the reason why. So instead of doing that trade, black just played king f8. And white kind of insisted on a trade. I guess maybe a trade was forced since this rook was covering the e1 square, so silly me forgetting about that. We have king to h2, rook to g7, rook to h6, rook to f2 check, king to h3, rook takes c2, rook to f6 check. Like, there are still a lot of moves in the game, so apologies if I'm going through them very quickly. I'm defending the pawn here. Rook to b2, rook e3 check, king to f6. In another engine analysis of the game, the engine called king to f6 an inaccuracy, and this time I do actually kind of agree. Like, I don't like king to f6 personally, just because I don't think the king actually really needs to participate in the offense, since black is going to be playing offensively with their pawns. I think the king is much more valuable as a defensive piece, since white's going to have these connected passed pawns running down the board, and very often you want your king to be, on the back rank in front of the pawns, like just all the way back here, ready to help stop them. But anyway, we have king to f6, bishop takes c4, rook to b6, bishop to d5, rook to d6, pawn to c4, pawn to a5, king to h4, rook to e7. I've been trying to trade rooks, because trading pieces will greatly help simplify. My engine prefers pawn to a4, but anyway, rook f3 check, king to g7, rook to a3, rook to a7, king to g5, pawn to a4. I'm not fully sure why this move is inaccurate. King to f5, pawn to h5, king to e5, rook to g6, bishop to e6. Like, white is losing, but white is doing a great job of just fighting on trying to, maybe salvage a win or maybe salvage a draw. Like, more likely salvage a draw, but anyway, pawn to h4. Like, that's part of the difference between a super grandmaster and a regular grandmaster, is that super grandmasters are much more resilient. They can often snatch draws from games that they should have lost. Anyway, we have pawn to d5, rook to g3, rook to a1, pawn to h3, pawn to d6, pawn to h2, and here in this position, white should not play pawn to d7. If white plays pawn to d7, then black can actually just take, and after takes, rook here, and black has two threats, promoting or taking the rook. White cannot stop both threats, so as a result, in this position, instead of playing pawn to d7, white now played rook to h1, just trying to stop this pawn. We have a3, rook takes h2, a2, white is forced to sacrifice the rook, otherwise the pawn promotes. Rook takes a2, d7, rook to a8, stopping promotion. c5. Apparently, bishop to d5 was a bit more resilient, but we are on, like, move 85 right now, or 86. Very long game. Pawn to c5. Rook to c3. King to d6. King to f6. Bishop d5. Rook d3. And it was in this position that white decided to resign, which actually makes a lot of sense. And so, the reason why white resigned here is because, well, there are multiple things that white can try, but they don't work. Like, for example, if white tries king to c6, then black can play rook a6 check, and after king b7, rook takes here, king takes a6, rook takes here. Basically, black's going to sack their rook for white's bishop. After c6, rook h7, king b6, king e6, black is just in time to stop the pawn. And basically what black will do here is just rook h8 and just go win the pawn. If instead, in this position, if instead of trying king to c6, which is what the engine says is best, if instead white tries probably the much more intuitive pawn to c6, then black can still sacrifice. I play like this, and then play king to e7, king to c5. Like, this might not be like the best way of going about it, but it's a pretty intuitive way. If white tries king to d6 here, then you just pin the pawn, you stop it from coming forward. King to c5, and according to the engine, rook a1 is best, but I think king c7 also works. Basically, you want to get your king in front of these pawns, just sit in front of these pawns, and then eventually have it be so that like have it be like you want your rook to be behind the pawns, king in front of the pawns. You want to have it be so that basically you're able to take this pawn with your king, and your rook can take like covers the promotion square, you know, stuff like that. After king c5, rook d2, king b5, rook d5 check, for example, like c4, king takes c6. That's how you go about it. Like that's a technique that would work here. I don't know if it's the best technique, but generally with connected passed pawns, you want the king to be in front, and you want the rook to be in back. The king can defend the and from the pawns from the front, and the rook helps like provide support from the back. That kind of stuff, or sometimes from the side, as well. But anyway, this was a very well played game by both players. Like White did make a bit of an inaccuracy in the opening with the move knight to f5, but hopefully like the moves before that were still very instructive and just showing the kinds of challenges that Black is faced with in this line, like solving the problem of figuring out what to do with their light square bishop, like with ideas like maybe b6, a5, bishop a6, you know, stuff like that. And yeah, that'll do for now. Oh, I hope that you enjoyed. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Bye for now.